Turns out there's a special kind of confidence that comes with giving your wife of 12 years an ultimatum about your affair. And an even more special kind of panic when you realize she's been playing chess while you were playing checkers. Let me paint you a picture. Monday night, October 14th, 9:47 p.m. I'm folding laundry in our perfectly decorated Westfield, New Jersey living room when Barrett strolls in like he's about to deliver a TED Talk on how to destroy your marriage in one conversation. The man actually loosened his tie, his real estate agent tie that I've been ironing for 12 years, and cleared his throat like he was about to announce quarterly earnings. "Tess," he says, using that patronizing tone usually reserved for explaining the mortgage process to first-time homebuyers. "We need to talk." Now I've been married long enough to know that "we need to talk" translates to "I've already made a decision and I'm about to make it your problem." But I played along, setting down Macy's soccer uniform and giving him my full attention. Because that's what good wives do, right? We listen. We accommodate. We pretend we don't notice when our husband's late client meetings started happening 3 times a week at the exact same time our neighbor Celeste Morrison starts posting cryptic Instagram stories about deserving happiness. "I'm in love with Celeste," Barrett announced, like he was revealing the weather forecast. "I have been for 6 months. I want to be with her, but I also don't want to hurt you or the kids unnecessarily." The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of this man to frame his affair as a considerate gesture. But here's where it gets really rich. Barrett, my husband who can't remember to replace the toilet paper roll but apparently has a photographic memory for affair logistics, then delivered his masterstroke. "I'm giving you 24 hours to think about it. You can either accept that I need Celeste in my life and we figure out how to make this work as a family, or we get divorced. Your choice. My choice." How generous. What Barrett didn't know, what this absolute walnut of a human being couldn't possibly fathom, was that I'd been collecting evidence like a suburban Sherlock Holmes for 2 solid weeks. See, Celeste might be great at sneaking around, but she's terrible at social media OPSEC. Who posts Instagram stories from inside someone else's car? Who geotags the Motel 6 on Route 22 at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday? Who uses song lyrics like "Finally found my soulmate" as captions when your husband follows your account? Amateur hour. Absolute amateur hour. While Barrett was delivering his ultimatum with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards, I was mentally reviewing the comprehensive file I'd already compiled. Screenshots of their text conversations that I'd retrieved from our shared cloud storage. Photos of them at that dingy motel. Credit card statements showing charges at jewelry stores I'd never seen. Even the receipt from the lingerie shop, because apparently buying your mistress underwear on the joint credit card is what passes for romance these days. But the real kicker? The absolute crown jewel of Barrett's stupidity? He picked the wrong neighbor to have an affair with. You see, Marshall Morrison, Celeste's husband who lives 3 houses down in our cozy little Westfield subdivision, isn't just any regular suburban dad coaching Little League and grilling burgers on weekends. Marshall Morrison is a divorce attorney. Not just any divorce attorney, but one of those sharks who specializes in high-asset divorces and custody battles. The kind of lawyer who turns cheating spouses into financial footnotes. And Marshall Morrison had no idea his wife was cheating. Yet. 24 hours, Barrett repeated, checking his watch like he was timing a business presentation. "I need an answer by tomorrow night." I looked at my husband, really looked at him, standing there in our living room surrounded by family photos and kids' artwork, demanding I accept his betrayal like it was a minor schedule adjustment. This man who I'd supported through real estate licensing, who I'd comforted through his father's death, who I'd built a life with in this perfect suburban bubble. "Okay," I said simply. "I'll think about it." Barrett looked almost disappointed by my calm response. I think he was expecting tears, maybe some begging. Drama that would make him feel important, validate his narrative about being trapped in a loveless marriage. Instead, he got a wife who simply nodded and went back to folding laundry. What he didn't see was the slight smile tugging at the corner of my mouth as I folded Knox's soccer jersey. Because while Barrett was giving me 24 hours to process his betrayal, I'd already spent the last 2 weeks processing something much more interesting exactly how to destroy both their lives with surgical precision. The man wanted to play hardball? Fine. But he should have checked if I knew the rules first. 24 hours. What Barrett didn't realize was that 24 hours was about 23 and a half hours more than I needed to end this charade. Because tomorrow morning at exactly 6 a.m., Marshall Morrison was going to get the wake-up call of his life. And Barrett? Barrett was about to learn the hard way that ultimatums only work when you're not married to someone who's been 3 steps ahead of you for weeks. Tuesday morning arrived with all the suburban pleasantness of a Hallmark movie, if Hallmark movies featured marriage-destroying bombshells and enough passive aggression to power the entire Westfield school district. Barrett bounded downstairs at 7 a.m., looking like a man who'd slept the peaceful sleep of someone who'd successfully shifted all his problems onto his wife's shoulders. He even hummed while pouring his coffee, which was rich considering the man usually moved through our morning routine with the enthusiasm of someone attending his own funeral. "Morning, Tess?" he said, actually kissing my forehead like we were still playing house. "Sleep well?" I was packing Macy and Knox's lunches, same routine I'd been doing for 5 years, but today felt different. Today felt like the last time I'd be doing it as Barrett Walker's wife. "Like a baby," I replied. Which was technically true if babies spent the night drafting devastating email attachments and practicing innocent facial expressions in bathroom mirrors. The kids thundered down the stairs, Knox in his rumpled school uniform because the child treats getting dressed like an Olympic sport, and Macy already stress-eating cereal because she had a math test. Normal Tuesday morning chaos in the Walker household, except their father had just nuked their family stability, and their mother was about to return the favor. "Dad, can you drive us today?" Macy asked through a mouthful of Lucky Charms. "Mom always makes us leave too early." "Can't today, sweetheart," Barrett said, ruffling her hair with the casual affection of a man who had no idea he was about to become a weekend dad. "Big client meeting." Right, big client meeting. Was that what we were calling it now? I watched Barrett grab his briefcase. The same briefcase where I'd found Celeste's love notes tucked behind his business cards like some twisted version of a treasure hunt. The man had the organizational skills of a toddler but somehow managed to keep an affair running for 6 months. Life's funny like that. "I'll be home late tonight," he announced, straightening his tie. "That client meeting might run long." "Of course it will," I said sweetly, handing him his travel mug. "These important meetings always do." Barrett paused for just a second, something flickering behind his eyes like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to realize that his wife's sudden compliance was about as genuine as a $3 bill. But then Macy spilled juice on her uniform, and Knox couldn't find his backpack, and the moment passed in the beautiful chaos of family life, the family life he'd just chosen to blow up. After Barrett left for his client meeting, which I knew was actually a 9 a.m. coffee date with Celeste at that trendy place downtown where she likes to post aesthetic latte photos, I got the kids off to school and settled in for the most productive morning of my life. Step 1. Final review of my evidence file. Screenshots organized chronologically. Credit card statements highlighted in yellow. Photos printed in high resolution because nothing says your marriage is over, like crystal clear images of your spouse's betrayal. I'd even created a timeline, because if you're going to destroy someone's life, you might as well be thorough about it. Step 2. Craft the perfect email to Marshall Morrison. This wasn't just any email. This was the email equivalent of a surgical strike, designed to deliver maximum impact with minimum emotion. No hysterics, no desperate wife dramatics, just cold, hard facts presented by one suburban parent to another. "Marshall," I typed, "I believe there are some things about your wife Celeste that you should be aware of. I've attached documentation that I think you'll find concerning. As a fellow parent in this community, I felt you deserved to know. Please contact me if you need any clarification. Best regards, Tessa Walker. Professional. Devastating. Perfect." The attachments were the real masterpiece. 43 screenshots, 12 photos, 8 credit card statements, and a detailed timeline that would make the FBI jealous. Everything organized in folders labeled with military precision. Communications, financial evidence, photographic documentation, and my personal favorite, motel receipts. Step 3. Schedule the email for 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, exactly 24 hours after Barrett's ultimatum, just as he'd be sitting down for his morning coffee, probably congratulating himself on his brilliant manipulation tactics. But here's where it gets really beautiful. While I was orchestrating the complete destruction of Barrett and Celeste's little fantasy, our neighbor drama was providing its own entertainment. Around 10 a.m., I decided to take a little walk around the neighborhood. Get some fresh air, clear my head. Definitely not conduct surveillance on my cheating husband and his mistress. And what do I see parked in Celeste's driveway? Barrett's car. At 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, during his big client meeting. The sheer stupidity was almost artistic. Here I am, potentially discovering their affair for the first time, and these two geniuses are conducting their business in broad daylight 3 houses away from where their children walk to the school bus. I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo. Just Barrett's distinctive BMW in Celeste's driveway. Timestamp clearly visible. Evidence item 44 for Marshall's growing collection. 20 minutes later, Barrett's car was gone, and Celeste emerged looking like she'd been thoroughly meeting. Hair slightly messed, that post-satisfaction glow that I used to recognize on my own face, back when my husband actually came home to me instead of stepping out on me. She saw me across the street and actually waved at the wife of the man she'd been screwing for 6 months. The audacity was almost admirable. Almost. "Hi, Tessa," she called out, all smiles and suburban friendliness. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" "Gorgeous," I replied, giving her my brightest smile. Perfect day for new beginnings. If she caught the double meaning, she didn't show it. Celeste Morrison was many things. Beautiful, charming, apparently good enough in bed to convince my husband to risk his family. But sharp wasn't one of them. As I walked back toward my house, I couldn't help but think about timing. In less than 20 hours, Marshall Morrison would be reading my carefully crafted email over his morning coffee. In less than 20 hours, Barrett would be getting the phone call that would end his affair, his marriage, and probably his standing in our tight-knit suburban community. But for now, for these last precious hours of ignorance, Barrett and Celeste could keep playing their little game. They could keep thinking they were smarter than everyone else, that they'd found some loophole in marriage and morality that the rest of us were too stupid to discover. Because tomorrow morning, when Marshall Morrison, divorce attorney extraordinaire, opened his email and saw exactly what his wife had been doing, Barrett's 24-hour ultimatum was going to seem like the cutest thing in the world. Karma, as it turns out, has perfect timing. Tuesday evening arrived with all the suburban normalcy of a family sitcom, except the laugh track was playing in my head, and the punchline was going to be devastating. Barrett came home at 6:30 p.m. looking like a man who'd spent the day making difficult decisions about his future, which technically he had. He just had no idea how those decisions were about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. "Kids," he announced over dinner, "your mom and I need to have a grown-up conversation after you go to bed." Macy looked up from her spaghetti with the kind of 10-year-old intuition that cuts through adult bullshit like a laser. "Are you getting divorced?" Knox, 7 and blissfully unaware of adult complications, just asked if he could have more garlic bread. "We're just talking, sweetheart," I said, giving Macy what I hoped was a reassuring smile. Sometimes grown-ups need to discuss boring adult stuff. Barrett shot me a grateful look, probably thinking I was already falling in line with his new reality. Sweet, naive Barrett. If he only knew that by tomorrow morning, boring adult stuff was going to include custody agreements and asset division. After the kids were tucked in, Knox with his dinosaur stories, Macy with her chapter book and a promise that everything would be okay, Barrett and I settled in the living room for what he clearly thought would be my surrender. "So," he said, sitting across from me like we were about to negotiate a business contract, "have you thought about what I said?" I had thought about it. I'd thought about it while scheduling my devastating email to Marshall. I'd thought about it while researching New Jersey divorce laws. I'd thought about it while calculating exactly how much Barrett stood to lose when this whole thing exploded. "I have," I said carefully, "but I need to understand something first. When you say you want Celeste in your life, what exactly does that look like?" Barrett's face lit up like I'd just asked him to describe his favorite hobby, which I guess I had. "Well, Obviously, she'd leave Marshall, he said, leaning forward with the enthusiasm of someone outlining a vacation itinerary. We've talked about this extensively. She's not happy in her marriage either. Marshall works all the time. He's emotionally unavailable. He doesn't appreciate her. Right. Marshall Morrison, successful divorce attorney, who provides a beautiful home in an exclusive neighborhood and apparently commits the unforgivable sin of working hard to maintain their lifestyle. What a monster. And then what? I asked. She moves in here? With her kids? Eventually, yes. We'd blend our families. The kids would adjust. Kids are resilient. And you... Barrett paused, clearly having reached the part of his fantasy where he had to figure out what to do with his current wife. You could find someone who makes you happy too. Someone who appreciates you the way you deserve. The condescension was breathtaking. This man was literally telling me I should be grateful for his affair, because it would free me up to find someone better. The psychological gymnastics required to frame adultery as a gift to your spouse was Olympic level. That's very thoughtful of you, I said. But what about the practical stuff? Money? Custody? The house? Barrett waved his hand dismissively. We'll figure it out. Divorce doesn't have to be ugly if everyone's mature about it. Mature about it. This from the man who'd been sneaking around for 6 months like a teenager. And you've discussed all this with Celeste? Of course. We've planned everything. She's ready to leave Marshall. She just needs to know you're okay with this before she makes her move. There it was. The missing piece I'd been wondering about. Celeste was waiting for my blessing before she blew up her own marriage. How considerate. Barrett, I said slowly. Can I ask you something? When did you know you loved her? His whole demeanor softened, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married 12 years ago. Remember that block party in April? When you were sick with that terrible flu and couldn't go? I remembered. I'd been bedridden for 3 days with what felt like the plague, and Barrett had taken the kids to Celeste's neighborhood barbecue. She took care of everything, Barrett continued. Made sure Macy and Knox were fed, played games with them, even helped them with the craft station. And afterward, she brought soup over for you. Do you remember? I did remember. Celeste showing up at our door with homemade chicken soup and a soft smile, asking if there was anything else she could do to help. I'd been so grateful for the kindness. That's when I knew, Barrett said. She's everything I need, Tess. She's warm, caring, spontaneous. She makes me feel alive again. And there it was, the knife twisted just right. Barrett had fallen in love with Celeste while she was taking care of his sick wife and children. The woman had seduced my husband by being nice to my kids and bringing me soup. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that I almost had to admire the artistry of it. I see, I said. And you really think Marshall will just let her go? Barrett's confidence faltered slightly. Marshall's focused on his career. Honestly, I think he'll be relieved. Celeste says he barely notices when she's there anyway. Oh, Barrett. Sweet, delusional Barrett. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Marshall Morrison wasn't just some workaholic husband who'd shrug off his wife's affair. Marshall Morrison was a divorce attorney who'd built his career on destroying cheating spouses in court. The man specialized in making affairs as expensive as possible. And in less than 12 hours, he was going to discover that his wife had been cheating with the neighbor who lived 3 houses down. Okay, I said finally. I'll accept it. Barrett's relief was immediate and overwhelming. He actually slumped in his chair like he'd been holding his breath for 24 hours. Really? You're okay with this? I want you to be happy, I said, which was true in a way. I did want Barrett to be happy. Right up until the moment Marshall Morrison destroyed his life. Thank you, Tess. I know this isn't easy, but I really think this is best for everyone. We can tell the kids this weekend, start making plans for how to transition everything. Barrett stood up, probably planning to call Celeste with the good news. But I had one more question. Barrett, just out of curiosity, when were you planning to tell Marshall? He paused, hand already reaching for his phone. Well, Celeste thought she'd wait until after his big case next month. She doesn't want to distract him while he's preparing. How thoughtful. Celeste wanted to wait until her husband finished his current divorce case before asking for one of her own. That makes sense, I agreed. No point in rushing these things. Barrett smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months, and headed upstairs to make his victory call to Celeste. I stayed in the living room, watching the clock tick toward Wednesday morning. In 6 hours and 17 minutes, my carefully scheduled email would arrive in Marshall Morrison's inbox. In 6 hours and 17 minutes, Barrett's affair would go from secret romance to legal warfare. But for now, I let Barrett have his moment of triumph. Let him call Celeste and celebrate their successful manipulation of the situation. Let them think they'd won. Because tomorrow morning, when Marshall Morrison opened his email and saw 44 pieces of evidence documenting his wife's affair, Barrett was going to learn something important about ultimatums. They only work when you're the one holding the cards. Wednesday morning, 6 a.m. sharp. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone buzzed with an email confirmation. Message delivered to Marshall Morrison. Game on. Barrett was still upstairs, probably dreaming about his new life with Celeste, when I heard the first signs that my carefully orchestrated plan was working perfectly. A car door slammed 3 houses down. Aggressive, angry, then another, then the unmistakable sound of raised voices. By 6:15 a.m., I was positioned at our front window with my coffee mug, watching better entertainment than anything Netflix could offer. Marshall Morrison's black BMW was parked in his driveway, and through their front windows, I could see silhouettes moving in what was clearly a very animated discussion. Even from 3 houses away, the body language was unmistakable. Marriage ending in real time. My phone rang at 6:23 a.m. Mrs. Walker? The voice was crisp, professional, with an undertone of barely controlled fury. This is Marshall Morrison. I believe we need to talk. Of course, Mr. Morrison. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Are you available to meet this morning? I have some questions about the documentation you provided. Documentation. He was already thinking like a lawyer, which was exactly what I'd been counting on. Absolutely. Would you prefer to meet somewhere private? My office, 8 a.m. I'll send you the address. The line went dead. Marshall Morrison wasn't wasting time on pleasantries, which I respected. The man had just discovered his wife's 6-month affair through 44 pieces of meticulously organized evidence. Small talk was probably not his priority. At 6:45 a.m., Barrett finally stumbled downstairs, still in his pajamas and looking like a man ready to start his new life. Morning, beautiful, he said, actually trying to kiss my cheek. Sleep well? Like a baby. I handed him his coffee. You seem cheerful this morning. I called Celeste last night after we talked. She's so relieved, Tess. She was so worried about how you'd react, but she's thrilled that we can finally be open about everything. Open about everything. That was one way to put it. That's wonderful, I said. When do you think she'll tell Marshall? Barrett paused mid-sip. Actually, we were thinking maybe this weekend. Give everyone time to process. This weekend. Perfect. They had no idea that Marshall had already processed everything and was currently preparing for legal warfare. That sounds reasonable, I agreed. No point in rushing. Barrett headed upstairs to shower, humming that same cheerful tune from yesterday. Meanwhile, I could see Marshall's BMW backing out of his driveway with the kind of aggressive precision that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. At 7:30 a.m., I was getting ready to leave for my meeting with Marshall when Barrett came downstairs dressed for work. Big day today, he announced. I'm showing the Henderson property to some investors, then meeting Celeste for lunch to start planning how we tell the kids. Planning how to tell the kids about the affair that was about to become the most expensive mistake of his life. Sounds busy, I said, grabbing my purse. I have some errands to run this morning. Errands. Like meeting with a divorce attorney who was about to become my husband's worst nightmare. Marshall Morrison's office was everything I'd expected. Mahogany furniture, leather-bound law books, and the kind of intimidating atmosphere that suggested billable hours started at $500. The man himself was equally impressive. 6'2", silver hair, and the cold blue eyes of someone who'd spent 20 years destroying marriages for a living. Mrs. Walker, he said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the information. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm not. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I prefer knowing exactly what I'm dealing with. Now, I have some questions about your husband and my wife." For the next hour, Marshall Morrison interrogated me with the precision of a prosecutor and the thoroughness of an auditor. Every detail of Barrett and Celeste's affair, every piece of evidence I'd collected, every timeline discrepancy that could be exploited in court. "Your documentation is impressive," he said finally. "Most people don't think to collect this level of evidence." I wanted to be thorough. "It shows. Based on what you've provided, I can build a case that will make your husband and my wife very, very sorry they decided to betray their families." Marshall leaned back in his chair, and for the first time that morning, he looked almost pleased. "Mrs. Walker, are you familiar with New Jersey divorce law?" "Not particularly." "Allow me to educate you. New Jersey recognizes adultery as grounds for divorce, which means your husband's affair can significantly impact asset division, alimony, and custody arrangements. Furthermore, my wife's affair means she's about to lose everything." He pulled out a legal pad and started sketching what looked like a battle plan. "Here's what's going to happen. This afternoon, I'm filing for divorce and requesting emergency custody of my children. The evidence you've provided will support claims of emotional abandonment and moral unfitness. Celeste will be out of our house by Friday." "And Barrett?" Marshall's smile turned predatory. "Your husband made a critical error in judgment. He chose to have an affair with the wife of a divorce attorney who specializes in high-asset cases and has a 20-year track record of destroying cheating spouses." "What does that mean practically?" "It means Barrett Walker is about to discover that affairs have consequences. Expensive consequences." Marshall walked me through the legal strategy like a general outlining a military campaign. Custody battles that would drain Barrett's savings. Asset freezes that would lock up his real estate commissions. Social and professional consequences that would follow him for years. "The beauty of your evidence," Marshall explained, "is that it shows premeditation and deception. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a calculated betrayal conducted over 6 months. That matters in court." By 9:30 a.m., I was walking out of Marshall Morrison's office with a clear understanding of what was about to happen to my husband and his mistress. Marshall had given me his card and instructions to call if I needed anything. Legal advice, emotional support, or just updates on how thoroughly he was planning to destroy Barrett and Celeste in court. I drove home through our peaceful suburban neighborhood, past the manicured lawns and perfect houses, knowing that by evening, Barrett and Celeste's little fantasy would be a legal nightmare. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. "Tess?" Barrett's voice was tight, confused. "I just got the strangest call from Marshall Morrison. He wants to meet with me this afternoon about some kind of business matter. Do you know anything about this?" "Business matter. Oh, Barrett." "No idea," I said. "Maybe it's about the Henderson property? Didn't you say Marshall might be interested in investing?" "Maybe. It's just..." He sounded really intense, and he specifically asked me to come alone. "I'm sure it's nothing to worry about," I said, which was technically true. Barrett didn't need to worry about anything. He needed to panic about everything. "Yeah, you're probably right. Listen, I might be late tonight. After I meet with Marshall, Celeste and I want to start looking at apartments." Apartments. They were going to start looking at apartments. While Marshall Morrison was preparing legal documents that would make sure Celeste couldn't afford a cardboard box under a bridge. "That sounds exciting," I said. "New beginnings and all." "Exactly. New beginnings." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. At 3 p.m., I was folding laundry when I heard a car pull into our driveway with unusual force. Through the window, I watched Barrett get out of his BMW looking like a man who'd just been hit by a freight train. His phone was ringing as he walked toward the house. Even from inside, I could hear him answer. "Celeste?" "No, I just left Marshall's office." "What do you mean served with papers?" "What papers?" Barrett fumbled with his keys, still talking frantically into his phone. "What do you mean kicked out? He can't just..." "Celeste, slow down. What did the lawyer say?" I positioned myself in the kitchen, pretending to organize mail while Barrett burst through the front door looking like his world had just imploded. "Tess!" he called out. desperation bleeding through his voice. "Tess!" I walked into the living room with the casual pace of someone who had absolutely no idea that her husband's affair had just been weaponized by one of New Jersey's most ruthless divorce attorneys. "Barrett? What's wrong? You look terrible." "Marshall Morrison," Barrett said, sinking onto our couch like his legs had given out. He knows. He knows everything." "Knows what?" "About me and Celeste. He has pictures, Tess. He has our text messages. He knows about the motel, the dinners, everything." I sat down across from my husband, arranging my face into an expression of appropriate shock. "How is that possible?" "I don't know. He said someone sent him evidence, but he won't say who." "Tess, he's destroyed us. Celeste has been served with divorce papers and kicked out of their house. He's asking for full custody, and he's threatening to sue me for alienation of affection." Alienation of affection. I had to admit, Marshall Morrison was thorough. "Barrett, I'm so sorry. That's terrible." Barrett looked up at me with eyes full of desperation and confusion. The worst part is, he seemed to enjoy it, like he'd been planning this for weeks. He had everything organized, every detail documented. It was like walking into an ambush. Because it was an ambush, Barrett. An ambush 6 months in the making. What does this mean for you? For us? Barrett rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know. Marshall made it clear that he's going to make this as expensive and public as possible. He's threatening to contact my real estate broker, tell our neighbors, even file complaints with professional organizations. The beautiful thing about Marshall Morrison's strategy was its completeness. He wasn't just ending Barrett's affair, he was ending Barrett's reputation, his career prospects, and his financial stability. "Barrett," I said gently, "maybe this is a sign. Maybe this is the universe telling you that some things aren't meant to be." My husband looked at me with the expression of a man who'd just realized he'd been playing checkers while everyone else was playing chess. "Tess, I think I made a terrible mistake." And there it was. The moment I'd been waiting for since Monday night when Barrett had the audacity to give me an ultimatum about accepting his affair. "What kind of mistake?" I asked. "All of it. The affair, the ultimatum, thinking I could just rearrange everyone's lives to make myself happy." Barrett stood up and started pacing, running his hands through his hair like a man having a nervous breakdown. "Marshall Morrison isn't just some suburban dad, Tess. He's a weapon. And somehow he got hold of evidence that could destroy my career, my reputation, everything. Maybe there's a way to fix this," I suggested. "Maybe if you and Celeste ended things, if you both apologized." Barrett laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "It's too late for that. Marshall made it clear that this is war now. He's going to destroy both of us as publicly and expensively as possible." My husband sank back onto the couch, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "Tess, I know I have no right to ask this after everything I've put you through, but do you think there's any chance we could work through this? Maybe try counseling?" And there it was, the complete reversal. 24 hours ago, Barrett Walker was giving ultimatums about accepting his affair. Now Barrett Walker was begging for marriage counseling. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, sitting there in our living room surrounded by the family life he'd been so ready to discard for a woman who was currently homeless and facing financial ruin. "Barrett," I said carefully, "are you asking because you want to save our marriage, or because Marshall Morrison scared you?" The honesty in his pause told me everything I needed to know. "Both," he admitted. "I'm terrified, Tess. Marshall Morrison is going to destroy me, and I finally realize what I was about to throw away." I nodded slowly, letting the moment hang between us. "Well," I said finally, "I guess we have some things to talk about." 3 months later, I'm sitting in my newly redecorated living room, same house, completely different life, watching Barrett load the last of his belongings into a U-Haul while our kids help him carry boxes. Turns out marriage counseling works best when both people actually want to be there, rather than one person using it as a panic room to hide from legal consequences. Marshall Morrison, true to his word, had turned Barrett and Celeste's affair into the most expensive midlife crisis in Westfield history. By the time the divorce settlements were finalized, Barrett had lost half his assets, his reputation, and his standing in our community. Celeste? She's currently living in a studio apartment across town, working at Target to pay her legal fees, while Marshall has full custody of their kids and their beautiful house. The beautiful irony is that Barrett spent our last marriage counseling session asking if there was any way to make this work, while simultaneously getting served with papers for Marshall's alienation of affection lawsuit. Apparently, you can't rebuild trust while your affair partner is texting you about which lawyer she should hire. Barrett moved out last month to a one-bedroom apartment that costs more than our old mortgage payment. The kids spend alternate weekends with him, which gives me every other weekend completely to myself for the first time in 12 years. Last Saturday, I got a pedicure, had lunch with actual adults, and went to a bookstore where nobody asked me for snacks or needed help finding their shoes. It was glorious. Macy and Knox have adjusted better than expected, probably because Barrett's big life change resulted in him being more present during his limited time with them than he'd been in years. Nothing motivates quality parenting like only seeing your children 4 days a month. As for Celeste, our paths crossed at the grocery store last week. She looked like someone who'd been hit by the reality bus. Exhausted, defeated, pushing a cart full of generic brands while I loaded organic everything into mine. She actually had the nerve to approach me. "Tessa," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I know you probably hate me, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked at this woman who'd brought me soup while seducing my husband, who'd smiled and waved while destroying my family, who'd thought she could just rearrange our lives like furniture. "Celeste," I said with my sweetest suburban smile, "I don't hate you at all. Actually, I should thank you." Her confusion was almost comical. "Thank me? You showed me exactly who Barrett really was. And more importantly, you showed me exactly who I am when someone tries to play games with my family." I pushed my cart past her toward the checkout, pausing just long enough to add, "Oh, and Celeste? Next time you decide to have an affair, maybe don't choose the neighbor whose husband specializes in destroying cheating spouses in court. Just a friendly tip." The thing about betrayal is that it clarifies everything. All those years I spent being the accommodating wife, the understanding partner, the woman who made everyone else's life easier, that wasn't kindness. That was fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of being alone. Fear of discovering I might not be as nice as I thought I was. Turns out I'm not that nice. When someone threatens my family, my home, my children's stability, I become something much more dangerous than nice. I become strategic. Barrett learned this the hard way. Celeste learned this the expensive way. And Marshall Morrison? Well, Marshall Morrison earned himself a reputation as the lawyer who turned his own wife's affair into a masterclass in legal warfare. The kids are thriving. Macy's grades have improved since the household stress disappeared, and Knox has stopped having those mysterious stomach aches that coincidentally started right around the time Barrett began his late client meetings. Children know when something's wrong, even when adults think they're being subtle. Me? I'm learning things about myself I never knew, like how much I enjoy having control over my own space, my own schedule, my own life. How satisfying it is to make decisions without consulting someone who might secretly resent every choice I make. How liberating it feels to stop performing happiness for someone who stopped appreciating it months ago. I've started taking evening classes, marketing strategy at the community college. Turns out I have a real talent for understanding human psychology and predicting behavior patterns. Who knew? Barrett texts me occasionally, usually something pathetic about missing what we had or wondering if we gave up too easily. Last week, he asked if I thought we could try again once his legal troubles were resolved. I replied with a simple message. "Barrett, some bridges don't get rebuilt. They get replaced with something better." He hasn't texted since. The truth is, Barrett did me a favor with his ultimatum. He forced me to choose between being a victim and being a victor, between accepting disrespect and demanding better, between staying small and becoming dangerous. I chose dangerous. And it turns out, dangerous looks really good on me. As I watch Barrett drive away in his U-Haul toward his new life of weekend parenting and legal bills, I can't help but smile. Not because I'm cruel, but because I finally understand something fundamental about power. You don't get it by being nice. You get it by being prepared. 24 hours, Barrett had said. That's all he was giving me to accept his betrayal. Turns out, 24 hours was exactly enough time to end his.